get everybody out and vote, there's not a thing they can do.
Make no mistake, we will win.
I've been waiting 4 years for this.
It is closing time, and both candidates are out on the trail tonight making their absolute final pitch to voters. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. It has been an election season like no other in a divided country between two candidates who could not be more different. And when you listen to these numbers, where we are right now seems incredible. Consider this. It has been 720 days since former President Donald Trump announced that he would run for president again. It's been 106 days since President Biden ended his own campaign, finally giving in to some powerful Democrats, and 91 days since Vice President Harris was given the Dem nomination, all of it culminating in tomorrow, Election Day. And our very latest poll showing a race that is literally neck and neck, a tie. 49% to 49%, meaning anything can happen. Harris and Trump both out on the trail tonight, delivering their closing messages to voters. The vice president crisscrossing through Pennsylvania, the state with its 19 electoral votes. It could hold the key to all of it. She was in Allentown earlier, and she is expected to take the stage in Pittsburgh within the hour, and she'll be ending her day in Philadelphia a little bit later tonight. Meanwhile, Trump also hitting Pennsylvania, holding rallies in towns of Reading and Pittsburgh, but he was also in North Carolina before that, another crucial state for both. And now he is on his way to Michigan, where he's going to end his day in Grand Rapids. Let's bring in NBC's Yamiche Alcindor from Pittsburgh. Yamiche, Vice President Harris's closing messages, those seem very, very different than what we've seen in the past few days, focusing on things like joy instead of a fight. What's with the 180 here?
That's right. This is really a Harris campaign that has come full circle. It started with joy, and it is now ending with the message of joy. In the middle, you had a lot of aggressive attacks on Donald Trump, talking about, of course, the fact that she believes he's a threat to democracy, that he's someone who would put himself over the country and even the Constitution. But now you see in the last 48 hours, and really in this last 24 hours, the vice president, just yesterday when I was in Michigan State with her, she, for the first time in a campaign rally, she did not say Trump's by name. She didn't use his name at all. And that really, the campaign tells me, is about her, quote, closing fully positively. So she's really trying to lean in on the idea that she has a vision for America, and she's this new generation of American leaders that people need to have in this country. Gadi.
She's closing with that message, and she's also kind of closing in Pennsylvania. That's her last campaign day there. So what does that tell us?
It's really interesting for the fact that she's in Pennsylvania, and she's really gone around the state to different demographics. She started in Scranton, and then she went to Allentown, Pennsylvania, which has a large Puerto Rican population, which, of course, is still reacting to that Madison Square Garden rally that Trump had, where there were racist jokes calling Puerto Rico an island, a floating island of garbage. Then she's going to be heading here to Pittsburgh. I'm standing right now at a former steel plant, which is where the vice president's going to speak in a few minutes here. And then she's going to go to Philadelphia to close this out, of course, the birthplace of our democracy. I should tell you that the Harris campaign and Democrats are feeling really good about Pennsylvania. I want to read some numbers to you. They say that mail-in ballot returns are at a higher rate this year, 81% in 2024 instead of 78% in 2020. They also see a particular momentum among black voters aged 30 to 49, up 27% compared to last week. And they're also saying that this is a ground game that the Harris campaign has, that they really feel good about it. They say 90,000 volunteers, and they knocked on more than 3 million doors, Gadi.
That's what the campaign's saying. What are Harris supporters telling you out there on the trail?
Well, I've been talking to a lot of people here in Pittsburgh, and they are feeling very excited. They really feel like she has the momentum and the wind at her back. She's been saying that on the campaign trail, that she believes she will win. We also talked to some Puerto Rican voters in Allentown, Pennsylvania, who reacted to that racist joke that was said at the Trump rally. Take a listen to what they said.
My first thoughts were, you never come for Puerto Rico. That's a mistake.
How that was allowed to happen, how no true Puerto Rican didn't get offended from it, because it offended all of us.
It wasn't a blessing by no means. I think it was disgusting what that person said, but it put us on the map.
So it's really interesting. There's been a lot of sort of chaos and scandals around Donald Trump for years, the decade he's been in politics. But this joke, this incident, it's really sticking, and an interesting thing to see, Gadi.
Yamiche Alcindor out there in Pittsburgh for us tonight. Yamiche, thank you. Like we said, our latest and our national NBC News poll is showing Harris and Trump right now neck and neck, each a point higher than last month when the same poll showed them tied at 48%. But when it comes to the gender gap, there's a very different story. We are talking 34 points separating who men and women want in the White House, with female voters supporting Harris by 16 points and male voters supporting Trump by 18 points. And if those numbers hold, it'll be the largest gender gap since 1980, which was Ronald Reagan versus Jimmy Carter. And a new poll out from the New York Times and Siena College gives us a last look at those 7 battleground states, which shows Harris leading or tied in 6 of them. But despite this, Trump told voters today that this is his race to lose.
Hopefully, everything will work out well. We're way leading. All we have to do is close it out. We have to close it out. It's ours to lose. Does that make sense to you? It's ours to lose. If we get everybody out and vote, there's not a thing they can do.
And NBC News correspondent Garrett Hake joins us now from Pittsburgh, where Trump is holding his rally, right? So, Garrett, he's headed to Grand Rapids, Michigan later tonight for his last rally. He seems to be running a little bit late there. Pennsylvania and Michigan, Biden won them in 2020. What are Trump's chances this year, then?
Well, Gadi, look, Pennsylvania more so even than Michigan is a state Donald Trump has to get back. His campaign sees his most direct path, the 270 electoral votes, as holding on to North Carolina, which has been the closest battleground state that he won in 2020, flipping back Georgia, a state where he only lost by about 12,000 votes, and winning Pennsylvania, another very close battleground that has seen, his campaign believes, a shift to the right in the 4 years since the last election. Those 3 states alone would get him above 270 electoral votes. Everything else is just a bonus. So appearing in Michigan late tonight is part electoral, necessity in the sense that they would love to win Michigan. It's a competitive state. He spent a lot of time there. But it's also been a superstition for Trump. He ended both his 2016 and his 2020 campaigns in Grand Rapids. Remember, to Trump, he believes those are both races he won. So keeping the superstition alive there a little bit with one last late-night rally in Grand Rapids.
And Garrett, in terms of the gender gap, how is the Trump campaign seeing the break in those numbers in those crucial swing states?
Honestly, Gadi, they've never really made much of an attempt to close the gap on the female side. What they've tried to do instead is increase the gap in their favor when it comes to men. That's been Trump's strategy all along in this campaign, appearing on male-focused podcasts and streaming programs, television shows, his high-profile attendance at UFC fights, his relationships with WWE wrestlers. The Trump campaign believes he can win this race in part by turning Trump fans, Trump supporters out there, particularly men and young men, into actual Trump voters. They have geared most of their resources and attention to that strategy over the last year and a half. And tomorrow we're all going to find out if that is a winning strategy or if the gap on the other side, where he struggles significantly with women compared to Kamala Harris, will overwhelm their testosterone firewall, if you will.
And Garrett, playing a little bit of hypothetical, in terms of who is headed to the Oval Office with Trump, if he wins, a lot of the old faces we saw in 2016 aren't around anymore, right? He talked about it a little bit earlier today. I think it's pretty important. Take a listen.
I will invoke. We'll do a much better job now because I know the people now. I know the good ones, the bad ones. I know the weak ones, the strong ones. I know the stupid ones. I know the smart ones. I know them all.
So, Garrett, if Trump were to win, who can Americans expect to see in his new administration?
Well, it'll be interesting to see, Gadi. One name that is certainly high up on the list is probably Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who dropped out of this race and endorsed Trump late. Trump has suggested that he put him in charge of the nation's health system. Whether that means he'd be something like the HHS secretary or in a non-confirmed position like a healthcare czar remains to be seen. But I think Kennedy, some of Trump's former rivals like Vivek Ramaswamy are likely to be involved. Also, some other folks we've seen him campaign a great deal with in the race's closing weeks, like former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard could be in the mix. But you make an excellent point. His former vice president, his former chief of staff coming out against him. a lot of his former cabinet members, even some of his family members, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, who were in the last administration, have said they don't want anything to do with another administration for various reasons. So the vetting and the installation of a second Trump administration would be something I would be covering very closely from my perch on Capitol Hill, because getting folks confirmed, depending on what happens in the Senate, could also be a challenge if Trump wants to try to install loyalists in some of those cabinet posts that require Senate votes.
Jared Hake out there with Trump in Pittsburgh tonight. Jared, thank you. And let's turn now to Nevada, a battleground in the West where more than 1 million people have already voted. And even though the state has voted blue in every presidential election since 2008, it has always been close. And these margins amounting to about 30,000 votes, both in 2016 and 2020. And this year could be no different. In the latest New York Times poll, Harris leads Trump by 3 points, which is in the margin of error. So let's bring in NBC News correspondent David Noriega. David, 1 million votes already sent in. Any insight into which way they could tilt the scale and what's influencing any last-minute strategy there?
Yeah, Gadi. So first, one thing that's special about Nevada is that in most swing states, they caution you against reading into the early voting numbers too much, right? But Nevada is kind of the exception because historically, a large proportion of all of the votes that are cast in this state are cast early, up to 80% in some past election cycles. So it is actually possible to read at least a little bit into those numbers. And so far, surprisingly, the Republicans are ahead of the Democrats in the early vote by more than 40,000 votes, so larger than that margin by which the Dems won this state in the last election cycle by about 4 percentage points so far. Now, that doesn't mean that the Republicans are going to win, of course, but it does mean that the Democrats are in the unprecedented position of having to scramble to get out the vote in the last, 48, 24 hours of, during which people can still vote to close that gap with the Republicans. That means that the Democrats are working very, very, very hard to turn out the vote, particularly turn out the vote in what is historically their base here in Las Vegas, the most populous county in the state, Clark County. That means working class, Latino and other people of color, people who work in the casinos, the resorts. A lot of them are Latino, as you know, Gadi, and they have been sending canvassers to knock on 20,000 doors a day. They have musical acts at this event that I'm at here tonight that are specifically geared towards that demographic. For example, tonight, Los Tigres del Norte are playing. They are a legendary northern Mexican band that's been making music for more than 40 years, won multiple Grammys. They speak directly to that Mexican-American demographic, and their goal is to try and get those people, particularly the men, to go out and vote for Kamala Harris. I actually got a chance to catch up with some of the guys from Los Tigres in their dressing room earlier. I asked them whether they think their concert here tonight and their efforts to get out the vote are going to make a difference. Take a listen to what one of them said.
We won Nevada and we won Arizona. The past election with Biden,
I think
we
it's
didn't
stopping
get
after this.
the states that we went and root the Democrats, and for us it's very important, not only with our voices, but when we go on stage and sing and play our music and we send that message through our music, I think is when they get identified and they remember where they're coming from.
Gadi, Trump has made inroads with Latino voters over the course of the last couple of years, especially Latino men. Those are the losses, the erosion that the Dems are working very hard to shore up right now. They have a lot going in their favor. A legendary turnout ground game machine here in Las Vegas. Acts like Los Tigres, other celebrity endorsements. We don't know yet and will not know until later this week whether that's enough to keep Nevada blue or whether Trump will be able to build enough of a diverse coalition to flip this state.
David Noriega with Los Tigres del Norte in a suit and tie. Not something you see every day. David, thank you. And come tomorrow night, we're going to be keeping a close eye on several counties that NBC News is calling the deciders. Those voters and issues are in battlegrounds across the Rust Belt, the Deep South, and the Southwest. And the trends here will help our decision desk examine the larger themes shaping voters' decisions up and down ballots across the country. In the state of Arizona, there is no battleground more crucial than Maricopa County, which is home to the most Arizona voters. And if recent history and campaign visits are any indication, these voters might just decide the entire thing.
We are in the frantic final days of the 2024 presidential campaign. How about this top-tier lineup of visitors? Harris, Walz, Biden, Obama.
It's a big day in the Valley. Former President Donald Trump is here today.
This is his third visit to Arizona in October alone.
This is Kamala Harris's event this afternoon, 6 miles away from where Donald Trump will speak tonight.
We haven't had a poll outside the margin of error, I don't think, in 2 weeks. So this is razor thin.
What's the most important issue for you right now that you want President to affect one way or the other?
Well, I just want the economy to be back to normal.
The people in the economy, giving everybody a fair chance.
Economics, anything in general. I know a lot of people talk about the debt, national debt, but more personally, I think it's more important that we make sure people have jobs.
What scares me is, again, like possibly losing my reproductive rights, my right to an abortion.
I'm afraid of every right being taken away from me as a woman.
My daughters, my granddaughters, my nieces, my nephews, they get the right to choose what happens to their body.
What matters the most to you?
The economy, the border, to fighting the corrupt politicians who have been in office for, decades.
Border, absolutely border. That's critical. That they're destroying this country with the influx of illegal criminals that are coming in.
Maricopa County's deciders could swing the election, and recent history shows that these voters could go either way. In just under a decade, this county flipped from a Romney stronghold in 2012 to a narrow Trump win in 2016, and Biden winning by about 45,000 votes in 2020. Now in 2024, it's ground zero for both campaigns, as they know, as Maricopa County goes, so often does the state of Arizona.
So it's so good to be back in Arizona and Phoenix. Are we ready to do this?
We're doing great in Arizona. I don't know if you've been here.
We need to swamp the vote in the United States of America, and that starts right here in Arizona.
1 or 2 votes per precincts in the state of Arizona can make Kamala Harris president. It's that simple.
So why Donald Trump and not Kamala Harris?
I think that Donald Trump does more for the people. I think Kamala Harris is a sham.
I think that he is about doing something different.
He is in the right place, the right age for this right circumstances that are going on now, the right person.
Why Harris and not Trump?
I think being selfish in this election is really important. Me as an openly gay man, coming from a family with sisters, I think it's really important that I stand up for the things that I believe in.
She's the most qualified person for the job, and we've never had a candidate that was more qualified than she is.
I like her. She's looking forward. I like her energy of being positive and lifting people up, and she's just got a wonderful plan for America.
And we're going to be going very deep into Arizona. We even have the Secretary of State in just a second. But before we get into Maricopa County and the state, let's check in with NBC News political embed Alex Tabbitt that you just saw there, joining us now from up in Prescott, Arizona. Alex, thanks so much for that package there. There's another very closely watched race happening right now in Arizona, Kari Lake versus Ruben Gallego. How are voters reacting to the Senate contest there?
That's right, Gadi. We're at the site of Kari Lake's last rally before Election Day, and this is one of the most hotly contested Senate races across the country. Millions of dollars have been poured into this race. You can't watch TV here for more than 10 minutes without being blasted by a Ruben Gallego or a Kari Lake ad. And for both candidates, this is really a race about redefining themselves. Kari Lake ran here in 2022 for governor. She lost that race, but she denied the results of that election, and she's been branded as an election denier ever since in the eyes of some Arizonans. In this race, she's not talking about election denialism nearly as much as in recent years, and that's an effort to win over moderate Republicans. For Ruben Gallego, the Democrat in this race, he rose through the political ranks here as a progressive Democrat. But here in the state of Arizona, there are 300,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats, and a progressive is going to have a difficult time winning a statewide contest. So he's moderated his stances on several issues, including immigration, in a bid to give himself a makeover. We shall see who is more successful in reforming their reputation in the eyes of Arizona voters in just a few days. Gadi?
And Alex, real quick, big picture here. Election Eve, what's standing out to you after talking to so many voters there in Arizona?
Well, Gadi, more than any of the other battleground states, this state is the one that might have the largest influence by college campuses. That's because Arizona State University has about 70,000 students. University of Arizona has between 30 and 40,000 students. And that's why we saw former President Donald Trump rally in Tempe at Arizona State University. That's why we saw the Harris-Walz campaign send former President Barack Obama at the University of Arizona. They know that this race, which was decided by about 10,000 votes in 2020, could come down to those huge campuses. Gadi?
Alex Tabbitt out there in Prescott. Thank you so much, Alex. And we can't talk about Arizona without going deep into Maricopa County, ground zero for when Donald Trump claimed the county was stolen after 2020. But even before the winner was announced, armed Trump supporters protested outside the Maricopa County Elections Office. And here's what that night looked like up close and personal.
This group of people, they're shouting at the reporters and the photographers, saying that those are ballots in there.
They don't have the watermarks on their ballots. They're just screwing themselves. Fraud right now. We are watching voter fraud. Hey, look, they got suitcases right here. There they are, folks. There's the ballots.
We're trying to document what's happening. We're trying to document what the people inside are listening to as they're counting those ballots. You've got a gentleman down there that you see with he's got some sort of tactical vest on, and then right next to him is a woman who's got a rifle slung on her back.
And joining us now is Adrian Fontes, Arizona's Secretary of State, who was a Maricopa County recorder back in 2020. Adrian, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us, Secretary. You ended up testifying in front of Congress about what happened that night. Why has Maricopa County become ground zero for this type of misinformation?
Well, first, thanks for having me. And second, I can't tell you exactly what is in the mind of every person here in Maricopa County. But what I can tell you is that the facts speak louder than the fiction. Ever since that time, and for many years before, and even since, Maricopa County has continued to deliver solid, secure, safe, and accessible elections for all of its voters, in spite of the lies, in spite of the threats, and the conspiracy theories. And I remember vividly those evenings. It wasn't just one night, it was several nights of that in a row, with all those folks right outside yelling my name, yelling the names of others, including that guy you saw out there, Mr. Chansley, who has already spent time in prison for his activities on January 6th. Alex Jones was out there, among others. And, you know, the bottom line is this. As long as your protest is peaceful, you go ahead and give it. But when it starts turning into threats of violence and other sorts of things, that needs to be limited. We do a great job running elections in Arizona, and I think we're going to continue to do that in spite of all this nonsense.
And Secretary, we saw some long lines at early voting sites across Arizona. I'm sure you've seen online the growing outcry of even the possibility that it might take up to 13 days for final tallies. Why does it take so long to count the votes there?
Well, we've got one of the most secure ways for our ballot-by-mail ballots to be processed. As a matter of fact, just the processing of one tray of 200 ballots takes about an hour for our bipartisan teams to run through, to audit, to make sure that what had previously already gone through signature verification process gets pulled out of the envelope properly so that it gets moved to tabulation. This is a very, very thorough set of processing that we go through. And I would say that it's probably more thorough than just about any other state in the nation, although there are plenty of safeguards across the country. It takes a while because we're very careful with how we handle our ballots. And that has borne itself true in any analysis of our elections. Every time you ask someone who bothers to look at the facts about Arizona's elections, they say we do a really darn good job. As a matter of fact, the 2020 election, from that footage that you were showing earlier, was administered by me. That was my warehouse at the time. I was the Maricopa County recorder. And I'm very proud of my team. The 2020 election is the single most highly scrutinized election in global history, and we passed every real test with flying colors. So it may take us a while. We may not satisfy the immediate gratification needs of some folks in your neck of the woods, but we get it right, and we're proud of the work we do.
I think the key phrase there was for those that bothered to look at the facts. Just watching those poll workers working and being there in 2020, a lot of what you're talking about is bipartisan, Republican and Democrat sitting there deciding whether or not those signatures are valid with a consensus there. So it is a very nuanced situation. Look, today I know was another day that almost adds fuel to the fire of confusion, but can you walk us through the latest with this legal fight over this list of some 200,000 Arizonans and this glitch in the state driver's license database? And really, before we get into it, like, take us all the way back. Set the context for us, because it is important. Starting with Arizona, you guys are the only state that requires proof of citizenship to vote in local and state races, right? So what happened?
Well, so as you just mentioned, in every state in the union, including Arizona, every voter has to sign an affidavit at the bottom of a registration form or when they're getting their driver's license that says that under penalty of perjury, they're swearing that they are a U.S. citizen, they're over 18, and et cetera. Well, in Arizona, we have an added burden that the law has imposed onto our voters. To vote in state and local races, our voters have to then submit documented proof of citizenship, DPOC. That's a birth certificate, a passport, a naturalization certificate, something to prove citizenship to vote in every other race outside of those three federal races, President, Senate, and Congress. So we have a bifurcated balloting system. You can get a full state ballot or just a Fed-only ballot. And this has been the law since 2004. And even before, we've had some other distinguishers in the motor vehicle division database. Now, what we have come to discover that for the last 20 years, our motor vehicle division has been violating the law, or at least it looks like that. And they've been telling us in the voter world that certain people have proven citizenship when they have not, or we can't tell if they have 100%. We took this case to the state Supreme Court. They said that we're going to let all these folks do what they've been doing for decades, vote the full ballot, and we'll sort this thing out after the 2024 election. But unfortunately, this bit of poor planning in the past, underfunding of state agencies throughout a long period of time, and just some mismanagement has gotten us to the point where these unfounded rumors of non-citizen voting has just added a lot of fuel onto that fire. So we're dealing with it. We're confident we're going to have a good election, even with all these conspiracies and lies floating around.
And as I understand it, this list of 200 or so, 200,000 voters, this list is now being turned over to a partisan group. Your office was hoping to stop that and maybe do it after the election. That does not seem to be the case. But can you tell us why you were hoping to not give this list over to this partisan group?
Yeah, well, they're not really a partisan group. They're a group of people that want to intimidate voters and threaten them. These are folks who I don't want them knocking on the doors of these registered voters and demanding their proof of citizenship and all this stuff based on these rumors and these lies that these folks might not be eligible to vote. So first and foremost, we're not 100% sure that anyone on this list still needs to provide that documentation. It's just a problem with the data. Second, I'm worried about the safety of my voters, and I'm going to protect them as much as possible. While I am a deeply dedicated public servant when it comes to transparency and getting that public information out there, when you've narrowly defined a group of people like this, they can easily be targeted with their release of their names and their personal identifying information. I wanted to prevent that. And I'm joined by several former law enforcement officers and many other folks who have seen this kind of activity in the past. So unfortunately, the court didn't agree. The appellate court shot down our appeal. And so we had turned those names over reluctantly today. But I'm going to continue to fight to keep all of my voters safe, including all of our election workers and folks, because this is supposed to be a civil exercise outside of violence or the threat of violence. And unfortunately, there's some people out there who just do not believe in American democracy. And some of them get into the realm of domestic terrorism when they actually threaten violence or commit acts of violence against folks for their political ends. We need to stop that. We need to make sure that we're protecting our voters. And I hope that some folks will come to their senses and not reveal any of these names to those folks who might do this kind of thing.
A civil exercise. Hopefully it's peaceful there in Arizona. Tomorrow, Adrian Fontes, Arizona Secretary of State. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And a reminder, join us tomorrow for complete election coverage. Watch NBC News Now for live updates throughout the day and analysis and exit poll info starting at 5 p.m. Eastern. I'll be right there in Maricopa County giving you the very latest from the ground. Don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, the case of Elon Musk's election sweepstakes heads back to court, while the DA there is calling it a scam, and what Musk's lawyers said in response. Plus, reproductive rights are a hot-button issue for a lot of voters, especially in areas of the country where contraceptive is hard to find. NBC's Dasha Burns heads to one of those contraceptive deserts for more. And the big question is, will we have all the answers tomorrow night? There are a lot of factors when it comes to the vote count, and we're going to break them all down for you a little bit later this hour. Hey, welcome back. And here's some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. A highway crash in Michigan last night left 4 people dead and 17 hurt. Police say a semi hit over a dozen vehicles on I-96, causing the truck and several cars to catch fire. The victims were a 29-year-old man and 3 family members. And heavy rain and tornadoes ripped through Oklahoma over the weekend, hurting at least 11 people and damaging 100 homes. The storms continue today as rainfall moved towards nearby states. With Election Day looming, officials say they are working to ensure polling places will be up and running. And a former Ohio police officer was found guilty of murder today for the fatal shooting of Andre Hill back in 2020. Adam Coy claimed he thought Hill was armed and attempting a robbery, but Hill was actually a guest holding keys. The shooting led Columbus to pass Andre's law mandating that officers activate body cameras and provide immediate aid if someone is hurt. Coy now faces life in prison and will be sentenced later this month. And Boeing's union workers hit the polls today, not for the general election, but to vote on the company's latest offer, and that includes a 38% wage hike over 4 years. Now, this is their 3rd vote since September, when over 32,000 workers walked off the job. If approved by a simple majority, it will end a 7-week strike for a company already facing a very tough year. And the world lost a legend yesterday. Music and entertainment titan Quincy Jones has passed away peacefully at his home at the age of 91. Over his 70-year career, Jones earned 80 Grammy nominations, influencing nearly every musical genre and producing hits like Michael Jackson's Thriller. His family shared that, quote, "there will never be another like him." And today, a Pennsylvania judge ruled that Elon Musk's $1 million a day giveaway to voters can continue. And this comes after Philadelphia's district attorney sued to strike it down, calling it an illegal lottery and a scam during a fiery testimony earlier. But Musk's lawyers argued that striking it down would violate free speech. They've maintained the giveaway isn't a random giveaway, since winners are screened to serve as spokespeople for Musk's America PAC, even though Musk himself said it would be random.
We're going to be awarding $1 million to randomly to people who have signed the petition every day from now until the election.
And since October 19th, a registered voter across 7 battleground states has been selected to receive $1 million. You see one of them right there, and today is no different. The winner was announced on X earlier, and another one is coming tomorrow on Election Day and the last day of this sweepstakes. NBC's George Solis has more.
Gadi, so in short, what this means is that the Super PAC and Musk can continue with these $1 million giveaways at least through tomorrow. And that was always the plan, according to the attorneys. One thing we did learn in court today from the attorneys is that this was never a random giveaway, as Musk had alluded multiple times. In fact, saying that these people were carefully vetted from a pool of people that signed that petition supporting First and Second Amendment rights. They were essentially vetted as spokespeople for the Super PAC and then given this money as a salary of sorts. The DA, of course, calling it disingenuous, saying it was an illegal lottery, calling it one of the greatest scams of the last 50 years. So what happens here? Well, this was a civil case, but that doesn't stop the DA from potentially filing a criminal suit, something that he alluded to today but didn't say he would actually do. A spokesperson for the DA's office telling us tonight, quote, "A lot of truth came out of court today, and it was jaw-dropping." Stay tuned. Now, before all of these proceedings took place, Musk's lawyers did hold a quick briefing about the case. Take a listen to what they said.
We don't back down from bullies. We don't allow our rights to be trampled upon by partisan agendas masquerading as legal arguments. In the end, truth will not be bullied, and neither will my client.
And Gadi, lawyers for the PAC for this swing state sweepstakes saying that all of these winners also had to sign NDAs. Now, NBC took a good deep dive at some of the winners here, finding out that most of them were either Republican or Republican-leaning, according to state voter records. And again, most of their likenesses appearing on the PAC's website and X accounts, which again is now, as we know, part of the deal of winning this sweepstakes. So again, we all have to wait and see now if the DA will go ahead and file those criminal charges. But all of this, of course, coming to a head. As we know, it is Election Day tomorrow. And as the attorneys for the PAC said, a lot of these checks already in the mail. Gadi?
George Solis in Philadelphia for us today. Thank you. And let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, is this a done deal now, or could there still be more legal pushback?
It's pretty much a done deal in terms of stopping the payouts in the way that Elon Musk has been doing them. And while we don't know why Judge Foglietta made his decision, I suspect it's really one of two things. Either he concluded that this is protected activity under the First Amendment, or I think the easier path is simply to say that, well, the Musk team says they're not going to give out any more money in Pennsylvania, so it's a moot issue. It's a dead issue. I could issue an injunction, but it would be a meaningless injunction since Musk has already said that he knows, the team has already said they know who's going to get it, and it's not somebody in Pennsylvania. That's what I think this is most likely going to be. So it's not really that the issue, it may not even be ultimately legally decided. It may just be moot. In other words, there's nothing to rule on because the controversy has passed.
And to a non-lawyer, I mean, this all looks like a, well, technically kind of case where you've got, Musk's lawyers arguing a lot about what words mean, a lot of weight being placed on the word random in this case. Can you suss that out a little bit?
So one of the things I thought didn't bode well for Musk's team is that they violated the principle of having to backpedal in court. In other words, they started out saying this was random and this was something that was like an award, a prize. And they pivoted in just the last week or so to say, oh, no, actually, this isn't really a lottery or a giveaway. It's more about essentially hiring someone to be a spokesperson for the PAC. And by the way, one might be fine, the other might be fine, but pivoting in the middle of your testimony, as it was reported that the Musk team had to concede during testimony that this wasn't the best choice of words, that signaled to me a possibility that the judge could go against Musk, which is why I'm thinking Judge Foglietta is just going to conclude that it's a moot issue, whether or not whatever Musk intended. The issue here, it's a lawsuit. And what DA Krasner is asking is for the court to stop future giveaways. So that's the issue, stopping giving away future giveaways. And there will be no more future giveaways. It seems that the principle of deciding the least amount that you possibly have to as a judge would be met by simply saying this controversy is over. Now, DA Krasner can consider criminal charges, but really, if you have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt and you didn't succeed in the preponderance level in this civil case, obviously the standards are different. But if you failed on the civil side, if I'm DA Krasner, I don't think I'm going to try for beyond a reasonable doubt after losing in civil court.
Yeah, deciding something as moot is probably a lot easier than deciding precedent. Danny Savalos breaking it all down for us tonight. Danny, thank you so much. And coming up, a key issue on the ballot for several states tomorrow is access to contraception. A closer look at what's happening in Missouri and why this issue goes beyond just getting birth control. But first, you got to see this. The Detroit Pistons, well, they rode the subway to Brooklyn this weekend right alongside other New Yorkers. This weekend's New York City Marathon caused a little bit of a detour for the team and their luggage. They were on their way to Barclays Center to take on the Brooklyn Nets, and the team very, very mindful of their fellow travelers and made sure to watch their heads when exiting the train. But they made it to the game on time. We'll be right back. Welcome back. At the polls tomorrow, millions will weigh a person or a party, but also questions. And access to contraception is one of those questions. And in states like Missouri, tensions are very high when it comes to reproductive rights. NBC's Dasha Burns has more.
This is the only clinic in a 45-mile radius that provides women in Missouri access to the full range of contraceptive methods. Nurse practitioner Kate Wagner sees some patients who are anxious that their reproductive rights could be further impacted with this upcoming election.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Some of our patients would, show up and they would say, my device is due to be, replaced next year, but I want to go ahead and have it replaced sooner than that because I'm worried about, the politics changing.
Kate says one of the biggest challenges is not just getting birth control, but getting the right method.
If folks realized how much you have to go through to get birth control that worked for you, it's not just one size fits all.
Missouri was the first state to outlaw abortion after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade.
What is the culture around family planning in the state of Missouri?
I would say the culture of family planning in Missouri constitutes a lot of fear and secrecy. I remember somebody called the office and asked if she needed to rip her IUD out herself. She was so scared.
It was in that aftermath that Maggie Olivia tried to pick up her prescription for birth control.
I ultimately ended up leaving and without birth control.
Maggie, who now works for a reproductive rights group in St. Louis, said the pharmacist denied her prescription because they were unsure if it was legal, which it was.
How does that experience sit with you today?
It feels infuriating. It definitely felt like I was doing something wrong.
2 months later, she got pregnant and crossed state lines to get an abortion.
When you can't control the care that your body can receive, it's a devastating feeling of powerlessness.
Maggie is not alone. In a state where tensions have long boiled over reproductive rights, family planning experts say women face mounting barriers to accessing contraception because of post-Roe politics, sowing fear, confusion, and anxiety among providers and patients.
Politicians purposefully conflate abortion and birth control. Our polling shows that almost 30% of Missourians don't believe or don't know that all forms of birth control are legal.
That confusion, a strained healthcare system, and contraceptive deserts covering much of Missouri make accessing birth control more challenging.
Contraceptive deserts, what are they and why do they exist here in Missouri?
Yeah, so a contraceptive desert is where there is not great access to contraceptive services. People may still have to travel, 50, 60, 100 miles.
Say that there's contraception deserts. I guess I would respectfully disagree.
Denny Hoskins is a Republican senator and voted in favor of a bill that would have excluded emergency contraceptives from Missouri's Medicaid program.
They do have adequate access to contraception in Missouri.
But didn't the state specifically take action to not support funding for contraception?
We did. Most certainly. I don't think that it should be paid for by taxpayer dollars.
6 in 10 women in Missouri are concerned about elected officials passing laws that limit access to birth control.
I've been doing this work for almost 20 years and have seen the chipping away of our rights, and it was really focused on abortion. And then over the last few years, we've really seen birth control also become part of that conversation.
That's why family planning advocates are pushing to pass an amendment on Missouri's ballot this year. The constitutional amendment would ensure a person's fundamental right to reproductive freedom, which would include abortion and birth control.
It's really a proactive measure that will keep politicians from being able to restrict that access instead of constantly having to defend for our rights.
Had this constitutional amendment been in place in 2022, I would have never been denied birth control, would have never had to flee the state, I would have never had to keep secrets from my doctors. Everything would have been different about that experience.
She's one of millions who will vote on safeguarding contraception, also on the ballot in Maryland and Nevada. Dasha Burns, NBC News, St. Louis, Missouri.
Dasha, thank you. And still ahead, an alleged Russian plot to start fires on cargo planes headed to the United States. The potential connections to a pair of explosions we've already seen in other countries. All that's coming up next. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. A deadly weekend in Gaza. Palestinian officials say Israeli airstrikes killed dozens of people, and Gaza's health ministry says one of the strikes was on a polio vaccination center. They also say Israel's consistent attacks in northern Gaza is stopping them from vaccinating thousands of kids. Israel denies responsibility for the attack on that vaccination center. And in Iran, a woman was detained after stripping down to her underwear in protest against the country's strict Islamic dress code. A video started circulating online Saturday, but it's unclear when this happened. It shows security guards arresting her near the university. A spokesperson for the university questioned the woman's mental state. And Japan launched a defense satellite into orbit today using its new H-3 rocket. The Japanese Space Agency says everything went according to plan. With growing tensions in the region with North Korea, Japan seems to be looking to shore up its military capability. And imagine staring down at a shark as it starts to circle you. One Australian diver captured this breathtaking moment on camera. Tim Ryan went into the cave looking for a crayfish with his friend when the shark, all 13 feet of that shark, showed up and started swimming back and forth around them. The duo managed to remain calm and quiet, and eventually the shark swam away. And some alarming news in aviation tonight. NBC News confirming Wall Street Journal's reporting out today that says Western intelligence agencies think Russia is behind 2 recent attempts to plant explosives onto cargo planes and could even be targeting U.S.-bound planes. NBC's senior correspondent Tom Costello has more.
Gadi, these explosives went off in DHL cargo hubs in Leipzig, Germany, and also in Birmingham, Britain. Had a bomb exploded while a cargo plane was in the air, the head of German domestic intelligence says the plane would likely have crashed and it likely would have seen debris scattered across a population area on the ground, and likely people there might have been injured or killed. A Western security official tells NBC News it could be a Russian operation to undermine support for Ukraine, and cargo flights to the U.S. and Canada could be targeted. This may have been a dry run. Polish authorities have arrested 4 people and are searching for 2 more, all with alleged ties to Russia, specifically the Russian GRU military intelligence. DHL says it's aware of 2 recent incidents involving shipments in its network and is cooperating with authorities. Meanwhile, the TSA says it is increasing air cargo screening, but government officials say there is no current active threat targeting U.S.-bound flights. Russia has rejected allegations that it's orchestrating any kind of sabotage campaign in Europe. That said, the head of both MI5 and MI6 British intelligence have warned Russia is actively involved in a campaign that includes sabotage and arson across the UK as well as in Europe. And earlier this year, the U.S. warned that a German CEO, the CEO of an armaments company, was targeted for Russian assassination. So intelligence sources both in North America and in Europe believe the Russia threat is very real, and they are now very concerned about these particular explosive devices placed on 2 DHL planes. Again, the explosions went off inside cargo hubs. The concern is what would happen if they actually went off in the air. So far, no indication that commercial passenger flights might be targeted. Gadi, back to you.
Tom Costello, thanks for the warning. And before we go, much more on our look ahead to Election Day, how long it could take to project a winner in the race for president, why each state's laws could make things extremely complicated. Hey, welcome back. While Election Day is tomorrow, that does not necessarily mean we're going to know who the next president is when we all head to bed. Counting the results could take days, just like in 2020. So why does it take so long, and when can we expect a final outcome? Well, NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett explains what's going on.
The moment the entire country has been waiting for.
The presidential race so tight in 2020, the winner took days to call. The high number of mail-in ballots creating a unique challenge for election officials, and this year may be the same.
It takes time to count millions of votes.
Pennsylvania's top election official Al Schmidt says he expects more than 30% of voters to cast their ballots by mail this time around. But state law prevents election officials from opening and processing those ballots until 7 a.m. on Election Day.
It leads to a perception that things are delayed in Pennsylvania. And they're not delayed at all. It's just the process.
A similar law in Wisconsin bars pre-processing of mail-in ballots ahead of time, while in Arizona, verifying signatures on early ballots can cause delays. In Nevada, a different challenge. Ballots get counted up to 4 days after the election, so long as they're postmarked by November 5th. All potentially resulting in a days-long gap between when polls close and when the race is finally called.
We've seen that as a real period of vulnerability for people to try to undermine confidence in the results.
We did win this election.
Former President Trump seized on that period of uncertainty in 2020 to fuel a false narrative the election was stolen. and has been trying to cast doubts on the results of this election.
They cheat. That's the only way we're going to lose, because they cheat.
And already the lawsuits have started flying, nearly 200 and counting. In Georgia, officials had concerns over new rules passed by the pro-Trump state election board, including one mandating a hand count of all ballots after polls close.
There's absolutely no reason to pass new rules this close to an election.
Those rules now blocked by a judge. For now, Republicans have focused their efforts on contesting the rules around mail-in voting in Pennsylvania, losing several lawsuits already, others still pending and left unresolved, providing a fertile ground, election lawyers say, for future fights in the weeks ahead.
The nightmare scenario is mail-in ballots where the parties contest the signatures, the date, or other defects in the ballot, and therefore we have a replay of what happened in 2000 in Florida with Bush versus Gore.
Laura Jarrett, NBC News.
So many states, so many different rules. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. Tomorrow, join us for complete election coverage. NBC News Now will have live updates throughout the day and analysis and exit poll information starting at 5 Eastern. I'll be out in Arizona, and I might be there for a while, but we'll see you tomorrow. And until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.